Welcome to this week's episode of the AWS Developers Podcast. I'm excited to discuss database migration, focusing on how British company CDL successfully moved 600 Oracle databases to Amazon RDS. Hello AWS developers, I'm Seb, I'm the new host of this show, and while my voice is new, the podcast mission remains the same, providing valuable insights for AWS developers like you. We'll continue to cover all things AWS and developer related. I want to take a moment to thank Dave Itzbitsky, who created and produced 115 episodes of this podcast. Dave has moved on to a new adventure, and I'm honored to continue his legacy. So thank you, Dave, and best of luck with your new endeavors. This week, I had the pleasure of attending the AWS Summit in Stockholm, Sweden, where I met Matt Houghton. Matt is an AWS ambassador, community builder from Manchester in UK, with an impressive 14 AWS certification. Can you believe that? He and his team at CDL, they manage an enormous task, migrating 600 Oracle databases to RDS Postgres. So we sat down at the AWS community launch, and I asked Matt the first crucial question: what is CDL?
So CDL is an insurtech. We're based in the UK, and essentially what we do is we use data and AI to power really high volume retail insurance journeys in the digital world in the UK. So if you're buying like house insurance or car insurance, then it's likely that your information will have flowed through one of the CDL systems at some point.
So you're working, or you're writing code applications for insurers.
Absolutely,
you're selling applications.
Yeah, so we're an independent software vendor as part of the AWS Partner Network. So we write all of the software to run the insurance ecosystem, and we host all of that software on AWS.
This story is about database migration. So you had 100 load of Oracle database that you want to move away from AWS. Can you explain the business challenge first? Why?
Yeah, so we had about 600 Oracle databases overall. And essentially, to remain really cost optimized, we follow well-architected principles, and cost being one of the really important pillars. So we needed to remain cost optimized. So we had some pricing challenges around licensing there. So we basically took the decision to move from Oracle database to Postgres. At the time, this is going back to kind of 2016. We still ran 2 data centers as well as being in the cloud. And we looked at building out essentially a Postgres highly available database architecture to support our policy administration system, which is our flagship piece of software. So this needs to be really robust, like I say, highly available, DR, all the kind of things that the enterprise customers that we have would expect as kind of table stakes when they were buying software.
So the first idea 8 years ago was not to migrate to AWS, it was to migrate out of Oracle to on-premise Postgres. And you start to work on that project first.
Yeah, we were doing, it's always busy at CDL, so we were doing multiple things at the same time. So we were building a brand new product on AWS, but at the time, the piece of software that we were looking to migrate from Oracle to Postgres, we saw the need to run that both on-premise and in the cloud. So we didn't look to go kind of cloud-only at that point. So we built out a version of the Postgres architecture that would run on-premise, and then we could run that in the cloud on EC2s, essentially, if we needed to. So there was a lot of what I would call plumbing work involved in that. So it's essentially learning how to take Oracle DBAs and get them to understand the Postgres engine, how to install that, how to patch it, how to back it up, write all of the kind of scripts that you would need to be able to do that. Look at the operating system, all the different operating system parameters, how to attach the right kind of storage to those EC2s or on-premise servers. We were using kind of NetApp storage on premise, so look at the compatibility of like NetApp drivers for things like database snapshots, which,
that's a lot of
spoiler alert,
work.
at the time it didn't exist. Yeah, so it's a lot of like I use the word plumbing, a lot of plumbing work there.
And differentiated heavy lifting. That's how
Exactly, that's the Amazon term for it. Yeah,
CTO calls it. But what was the tipping point? Why or when did you decide to move to RDS instead?
Yeah, so when you take a step back from all of that, what you realised was you were doing a lot of work, but you weren't actually working on the business problem that you'd been given, which was how to make it cost efficient, how to move from Oracle to Postgres. So when you look at that, what we decided was, even though we weren't cloud only, we took the decision as an engineering team to be cloud only for the database point of view. So we dropped the idea of being able to run it on premise, and we went straight into using RDS as a managed service, because that basically gets you ahead in the race. The patching and the installing goes away. That becomes Amazon's responsibility. Things like the backups become easier because you've got
RDS
snapshots and things
does
like
it for
that.
you.
Yeah. And what we got to spend time on was the differences in kind of dialects between SQL, between Oracle and Postgres. Things like Oracle-specific functions that were in database code and crept into the application code.
PLSQL store function.
Exactly that, yeah. So we had a lot of PLSQL that we had to rewrite to PG PL/SQL. The application code was doing things, calling Oracle functions or using Oracle-only functions. So we had to kind of refactor the applications there, which is the actual guts of any kind of database migration. You need to get the data over there to where you wanted to port it to, and effectively get the SQL as it is in a format that it runs in a reliable way, as good as it was.
With the same latency, the same performance.
Yeah. So we were already pretty good at doing the Oracle stuff. So we didn't want to kind of drop in performance in order to save cost. You had to have cost and performance. There were no trade-offs there.
Moving away from RDS actually free up some of your time, of the DBA team time, to focus on tasks that are of added value and not the plumbing, like patching, installing,
that's
backupping.
Exactly right. Yeah. So you're no longer looking at things like operating system parameters and things like that, or like NetApp filer settings and making sure the operating system's tweaked for that. You know, Amazon do a great job of making sure that baseline commodity database service is there and good enough for multiple customers. So what we found was really more of an organizational change, I would say, in that the developers got to spend a lot more time with the DBAs. So the DBAs are really awesome at like tuning SQL, making the database really sing when it gets given some work to do. So they were sat essentially side by side, whereas before they were in kind of like different rooms. So by accident, kind of doing the DevOps thing
together.
And that worked really well for us. Quick turnaround of where you find a problem, getting the right people already sat together, chatting through a problem, working through it, trying out ideas quickly, gives you a really agile way of working.
I'm always curious by the people side of this type of story. It must be frightening for a DBA to say, hey, we are going to move to RDS. So all the things you were used to do, all these low-level things are going to disappear. I guess people might be afraid to lose their job. How did it happen at the human level?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think that we were fortunate to have a really positive team. They were seeing a lot of work being done on other products in the cloud, and they really wanted to embrace it. What the team did was they broke up off into kind of groups within the team. So they were given like maybe a problem at looking at how does backup policy change for the database now we're in the cloud? So maybe 2 people would work on that, and then they would replay that back into the team as like a weekly like kind of learning experience. Like kind of over a lunch or whatever. Yeah. Internal meetups, so when you give people that information and you show them different ways of progressing, then they're more likely to be more engaged and embrace it. So we were really fortunate with the team that we had there, picked up the challenge and really ran with it and could see the benefits. The other thing that's happened since then, they've kind of kept on those kind of internal kind of brown flag internal meetup type processes, and I looked at a calendar the other day, and they run those at least once every fortnight, which is really good to see.
Even years after the migration,
because they're still learning and still improving, and there's always more you can do. The other thing is they picked up by picking up kind of key like cloud skills like infrastructure as code. They've been able to work on other projects. So before they were very database centric. They now work on things like they've been doing some QuickSight stuff recently, so they're involved in that. They've done a lot of kind of dashboards that help out the business. A lot of the team have moved to doing building a data lake using Spark and Hudi and Athena. So yeah, a lot of those kind of data management skills that they have as DBAs really do translate into the world of data analytics. And there's now 4 different data engineering teams with a really broad set of skills that we can call upon for different projects.
How went the actual migration by itself? I guess there are 2 phases. One of them is to learn all the tools that you just named, like Terraform to prepare the new database. And then there is the other one, which is actually migrating the data and deciding of a cutoff date and changing the application. So let's start on the first part. How did you manage at scale 600 database, this type of preparation work?
Yeah, so you need to build an automation process to manage that. You can't do it manually. So essentially what we did was we looked at tooling available from AWS and also AWS partners. So we use Click for the data replication side.
So Click is an application that looks at one database and migrate all the data as they are changing. If an application continues to update the data, it replicates the data like a stream of data going to the new database.
Yeah, so it's a change data capture tool is the kind of the marketing term for it, I guess. So Amazon have DMS, and we just used Click at the time because we were already using it on other projects. So it was like one less thing for us to learn. So don't try to do too much if you don't need to. But essentially, yeah, we use schema conversion tool from Amazon to convert the initial schema. We put that into a development Postgres instance, and then we use the change data capture software essentially to migrate the data over. At this point,
test environment first or development environment first.
Yeah, development environment first. So developers all have a range of development environments. So we picked one, migrated it, and got the developers to essentially start up the app. First time it failed,
of course.
So we hit these Oracle specific things straight away. So we kind of did some workarounds on that to essentially get the application to start. And that's where we hit performance problems. So it started, but it was terrible performance.
Why? It's not. Yeah, Postgres is less performant than Oracle. Right?
It's just different. It's different, and it's going to interpret it's. Oracle has like cost-based optimization. It's got a different query planner to Postgres. They're going to behave different. If you give it the same SQL, they are different. And it's not saying one's worse than the other. It's just different. And you need to go through that tuning exercise to make sure that the SQL is optimized for the database engine you're using.
And that's the role of the DBA, where actually the added value is there, is to understand the schema, the access plan, and helps the developers write efficient SQL statements.
Yeah, so the developers are really good at writing SQL, really understand the language of Java that we were using. Where they were less experienced was the actual nuts and bolts of how the database is interpreting that code and then executing it against the database server. And the DBAs, that's where they're wonderful at that. Yeah, they really come to the forefront. So we looked at things like we came up with effectively a list of a tuning triage list, if you like. So things like work mem in Postgres, the default value is too small, so we increased that. Giving the query planner enough time, balancing it between time so it doesn't take too long to execute, but giving it enough time that it comes up with an optimal plan. Just tweaking that knob in the right direction was really important to us. And then once we had that list, effectively we changed about 10 core pieces of SQL, and that basically got the application up and running in a reasonable time frame. And then,
I heard as well that sometimes Oracle is quite good at giving a good response time for queries that are not super well written, because the optimization engine is really good. And when you give the exact same query to other database engines, the performance is incredible. So you have to restructure some SQL queries as well.
You absolutely do. Yeah, you have to refactor the SQL. One of the things was the amount of columns that it was bringing back. We had to optimize around that. The number of tables that were used in a join, we tried to optimize around that. So make the queries as really self-contained as possible was a good tip that we had. The other thing was using the metrics that were available to us. So out of CloudWatch metrics, we used to stream that into an OpenSearch dashboard, so you could see problematic queries, and then you could work with developers to tackle them and really use that as an ongoing exercise to keep the tuning exercise going all of the time.
Is there any advice you can give to developers, the guys that are writing these SQL queries that are not necessarily DBA, they are more into code writing? What are the things they need to pay attention of if they know that the database is going to change?
Yeah, I think having a performance test environment really helped us. We used RDS Ready framework as an AWS partner, so it's very similar to like well architected. So we created a custom lens around that. Basically it's very prescriptive advice from Amazon around if you're using RDS in your application architecture, these are the things that you need to think about as a development team, as an engineering team. Things like how to do like credential management, like not hard coding credentials in code, use something like secrets manager or systems manager parameter store. Coming back to the performance test it against those RDS instances. Don't always test it against like a local instance of Postgres because it's different. Make sure you're testing with what's going into production. You need to test
the real RDS and not Postgres on your laptop.
Yeah, that was a really good framework for us to use, and we still use that today. The other thing is having the information to be able to triage quickly when you do hit a problem, because you are going to get problems. It's not going to be smooth sailing. So using the metrics out of CloudWatch and having those visualized in a way that developers could understand was important, so they could see when they do get something like problem SQL, it's identified, and then we can work together as a team, like developer and DBA, to work through those tuning steps, those triage steps that we.
So giving access the developers to the dashboard, to the logs, so they can identify the queries.
So we give them access to one of the added value things that our DBAs do is a self-service portal. So ability to clone databases with production volumes, but like masking the data, so you remove
personal information
data, and making that really quick. Basically improving the developer experience. Developers don't want to have to wait for a DBA to unload and load data into another instance in order to test it or to work through an incident, particularly if they're pressed for time.
Yeah, on-prem it can take hours to request a clone of a database, to start to experiment with something or to debug something. In the cloud, it's a matter of pushing a button in a self-service tool. That's the idea.
Exactly, yeah. You've got to look at the total cost of ownership between developer time and resources. So in a data center, you're resource poor. Essentially, you can only fit so many servers in the racks you've got. You don't have that limitation with the cloud. So your cost becomes people waiting on things, and developers are not cheap resources. They're highly educated, highly skilled people that, they're paid good money, and you want to use them really effectively. So having them not wait for things like database clones is really important. So now they don't wait for our DBAs to do clones. They request that for a self-service portal, and there's an automated process that the DBAs have built that gives them that clone. So instead of waiting hours or days sometimes on premise, they now get these things in minutes.
Yeah. And there is an automatic process to delete or to terminate the resource as well, to control the cost.
Exactly, yeah. So we make heavy use of tagging. So we put on hours and off hours, and then we have Lambda functions terminating those instances or shutting them down to save costs. Another thing that we're doing is going from like multi-AZ in production, using single AZ in development, because you might not be testing like failover early on in the development cycle. That might come later. So picking the right instance types for the particular type of workload, whether that's dev, non-prod, or kind of UAT on production environments, is really important. You have that flexibility as well.
With Lambda functions that are working like a garbage collection and delete resource automatically. I'm also curious about, but it's more operational than for developer. It's the cutting point. At what time you decide, okay, now we are confident enough that our applications are working, that the data are correct, and we are going to cut over. So stop the streaming and change the production application to use the new database. How do you plan and prepare for that type of event?
Yeah, so we were obviously running on-premise to AWS, so we had a direct connect involved. So we had a really reliable network link. So we actually start the migration process a number of days before the date. So what we do is effectively do a full load of the current on-premise database as it's running. We can't shut down the production database. It still needs to transact business. So you do a full load into RDS, and then change data capture software allows you to trickle feed the changes through over that direct connect link or a VPN if you wished into RDS. So effectively, you have a really, really small level of latency between production on-premise and what's going to be new production in the cloud. So then you can set a cut-over point of your application. So what we did is agree with a customer after testing, we're going to cut over on this date. So the downtime was really minimal. So the process we went through was stop the application. That generates some SQL. So you have a couple of minutes where those last few transactions replay into RDS. You can see the latency in things like in things like CloudWatch logs, or DMS. If you're using DMS, we had the same experience using Click Replicate. We could see the latency had gone to 0. We locked the Oracle database accounts at that point, so we could be sure there was
Nobody is going to write.
Exactly. We weren't missing any transactions. We ran a series of data integrity scripts to be extra sure, and then effectively just cut over the application. We'd already built the application in AWS as well as the database. So
it's just changing the connection string?
The endpoints at that point, yeah. And then you start up the application, and you can be really confident because you've been through this testing loop that it's going to be working. It's just automation. You removed as much human element as possible. So yeah, the migrations were effectively config-driven exercises through automation.
Sometimes developers choose a different strategy as well. It's to talk to the two databases for a period of time, like reading from one and writing to the other. And the cutoff is more driven by the application itself in the code. Yeah. Is it something that you use for some of your application as well?
We haven't done that, no. We've used what's worked for us. So we got really good results using change data capture. So we've continued to do that. But yeah, I think, look at the characteristics of what you've got, what skills you've got, and obviously make the right choice for your particular application. But yeah, I guess we were fortunate that we've had really good results with CDC.
Mm-hmm. How long was that project, migrating 600 Oracle?
Yeah, so we probably did it over a course of a year. So there's a lot of things that need to change, kind of like in the background as well. So legal and compliance and customer relationships, you have to go to each customer. It's their
for your
data.
Customers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and discuss to them about the cloud and the benefits of moving to the cloud, and have those conversations so that they can be really confident, educate them about the plan, educate them about the testing that we've done, so that they can just be confident in that project is going to succeed, because it's their business at the end of the day.
It was a whole team project, including sales and
it was a big effort. Yeah. Every part of CDL was touched by that move to the cloud. Yeah. So obviously heavy focus for me as an architect on the engineering side, but yeah, we couldn't have done it without all areas of CDL getting involved.
And over this 1 year course of the project, what would be the percentage of preparation and planning versus actually migrating the data and cutting it off and changing the application?
Yeah, so we had different customers going at different times. We had multiple customers going in like the same weeks. So start off and get your proof points really, and then you can accelerate into the project and go faster and do more. But obviously we proved it ourselves, so do all our development environments, make sure that we can run in the cloud, and then we can teach the customers, well, we're seeing these benefits, and give them the proof points so that we can build confidence with them, essentially. Yeah.
What are the biggest challenge you had during that project? What are the things that were not going as planned, or that all customers that are listening to us say, hey, maybe I should learn from Matt and not replicate the same? What is your experience, your advice for listeners?
Yeah, I think making sure you've got really robust like skills and education program in place. There's a lot of
back to the people, the training of the
yeah, because it's people that's got to make that happen at the end of the day. Probably shouldn't say this as an engineer, but the tech is there, and you can take advantage of it if you've got those skills in place. But if you haven't got that skill up program, because it's very different going from like a DBA who's heavily involved at like the operating system level to say you don't even have access to the operating system anymore. You can't tweak these things at an operating system level. So they've gone from like writing scripts to like writing infrastructure as code. So that was a brand new thing that they had to learn.
Learning Terraform or CDK or
Exactly
any other
that, yeah.
technology.
And the automation around all of that was really important. So what actually happened in our migration is that they actually changed their job titles. They went from being Oracle DBAs to data engineers because that was a better fit for what they were actually doing. So they were writing Terraform, they were building these self-service portals, they were writing automation and adding value almost as like a product on top of RDS. So effectively becoming a product team in their own right, rather than kind of like a database infrastructure team, which is more of like a traditional DBA role. Yeah.
What are the resources that CDL used to train the DBA? There was any like formal planning and going together?
Yeah, so we talked before about the kind of lunchtime sessions, so that was really important to get really specific learning documented in place and then feed that through the team. But the more generic skills, we used a combination of online kind of training platforms. So we use like Linux Academy, Guru,
yeah.
use Skill Builder now, particularly with a partner network, you get courses. And we also focused on certifications as well. So we made sure, for example, everybody at CDL has to have the cloud practitioner certification, because when you're moving to the cloud, new terminology and a new language emerges.
What is VPC?
Yeah, and everybody that's involved in that, not just the technologist, the project managers, the legal team, they need to be fluent in the language of the cloud in order to get
including the sales and including non-technical people, so that they know what we are talking about.
Yeah, so we have a very hybrid approach of like that on the job training, the dedicated learning through online courses. In bite-sized chunks, I would say works better because you can go straight to the thing for the problem you're working on, rather than kind of spending a week out of the office. And then obviously the certifications to back all of that up and also give us credibility as a team when talking to customers.
Any result of this migration? One of the main factors was cost, if I understand. Can you share any number, like cost reduction moving to RDS? Maybe there are other results as well. Like I know it's difficult to measure, but the developer experience, the efficiency.
Yeah, so I think the main saving came from like the developer experience and developers being able to do stuff faster and more efficiently and for a self-service way. So that's recurring saving that we get time and time again. The costs from like the licensing is obviously a big one. On the CDC side, I know consolidating CDC tools from like multiple CDC tools down to one saved us about 60% on the cost. So that was a big factor. But yeah, the main thing was around with Oracle, the different licensing options. You could only get things like Data Guard, which obviously give you the high reliability if you have Oracle Enterprise licenses. So some of our smaller customers, that wasn't an option for them, so they were on standard edition. So effectively, we're offering different versions of the software. With the move to RDS, things like multi-AZ essentially are just configuration, and because it's open source, there's no additional license packs to buy. So what we decided was everybody would get a really the most highly available option out of the box at the default level. So there's effectively an uplift in the service for no additional
for your
cost.
customer. I mean, your customer directly benefit from that as well.
Exactly,
at least a smaller customer, because for the same price they can get the highest level of data protection.
It's like the true SaaS model, effectively, where on premise we couldn't really do that at the right price points for people.
What are the things that keeps you awake at night in terms of future automation, data-related project at CDL? No?
It doesn't really keep me awake at night. I guess I'm fortunate. I like what I do as a job. I've been doing it for a long time, and if I wasn't doing it professionally, I'd do it as a hobby. So I think the opportunities are really exciting. So it doesn't keep me awake at night. So obviously we can't leave without talking about Gen AI. So recently we've been doing a lot around the developer experience and developer productivity. So a couple of weeks ago,
can you share an example?
Yeah, we launched a series of Gen AI days, or AI days, as we don't just focus on the generative AI side. So we ran a set of coding challenges with people using Amazon Q developer, GitLab Duo, and then a control group who had no AI assistance whatsoever.
And to check what group is the most productive.
Yeah, exactly. And we did it against levels in our career framework. So we wanted to remove as much bias as possible. So, not comparing like a principal developer against an apprentice developer. So we compared the right levels in our career framework against each other fairly. And what we've still got to actually crunch the numbers because I'm here at the summit. I haven't managed to crunch all of the numbers yet, but off the top of my head, one of the key figures that we found was a 33% ability to complete the coding challenges faster with the use of generative AI. So we were talking earlier, and I think I used the phrase like, don't start with an empty IDE. So that's really important to us, giving developers a head start, not giving them a kind of blank sheet of paper, and just getting them going as quick as possible. So I see lots of benefits there. The other thing we're doing in the analytics space is using generative AI with Amazon Q for QuickSight. So moving from dashboards to asking questions through natural language, that's something that we use internally, and we're doing a proof of concept at the moment for customer-facing data in the vehicle space.
It's interesting because the two use cases you mentioned there are about using generative AI as your personal assistant to make you more productive, not to replace humans like many people are fearing of.
Yeah, that's right. So unlike the QuickSight example, frequently when I go out to speak to customers, they have lots of dashboards, and one of the frequent things is, well, the dashboards give us 80%, and then there's the 20% that nobody's thought of built a dashboard for yet. I said, well, that's where generative AI comes in. So use your dashboards, have still people build these really impressive dashboards that give you KPIs and, are on displays on big television sets, really draws the attention in a visual way. But for that 20% of questions that you've still got unanswered, it's a brilliant use case for that.
Matt Houghton from CDL about migrating 600 Oracle database to Amazon RDS and Postgres. Matt, thank you for having answered my question and hope inspiring other developers to also migrate to RDS. Thank you for having listened to this episode until the end, and see you next week.